When you're going on a trip with your woman, it's real easy to remember what to bring. All you need is your toothbrush because you're getting ready to let it do what it do. But here's the easiest trick to remember the required equipment in the plane. Let go! Boom! Before you take flight in any plane, you always want to make sure the required equipment is in good working order. And there's a checklist and an acronym for this, just like there's an acronym for pretty much everything in aviation. But it's also a real special trick that can help you remember this acronym and help you remember just this information in general that I'll give you at the very end of this video to help you get through the process itself in your aviation journey. Boom! The acronym you want to remember for remembering the required equipment in your plane is A, tomato, flames, and then for the night portion, flaps. There's two separate lists. One list, required equipment list for daytime, and then of course the required equipment list for nighttime. A, tomato, flames is the acronym that you want to remember for daytime. And then for nighttime, it's going to be A, tomato, flames plus adding flaps on to the end of that. As you can see from the very beginning, this is a very extensive and long acronym. So it's something that's going to be hard to kind of like really retain a lot of this information to memory. So let's go through it and talk about A, tomato, flames, flaps, exactly what each of these letters in the acronym stand for and how you can kind of easily remember this. And then at the end, we'll talk about a nice trick to help you get through the process if you have to regurgitate any of this information either on your check ride or just throughout as you're trying to remember it before every flight. Let go! Boom! One of the great ways to memorize anything and a great memorization technique is to visualize. And what you want to visualize in this sequence is picture yourself inside the cockpit of the aircraft. You're getting ready to take off in the aircraft. And think to yourself, what of all these control surfaces and instruments and everything I see in here, what will possibly be highly required and more than likely required, absolutely required for me to take flight? And once you think about it from that perspective, filling in A, tomato, flames can be a lot easier. For example, the first A is altimeter. Of course, if you just look at your control surface, again, visualize being in the cockpit, one of the first instruments you may glance at is your altimeter. And of course, you're going to need that in flight. That is one of the required pieces of equipment that you're going to need, filling in that for A, tomato, flames. Then your tachometer, again, the same. So just thinking about that simple, don't overcomplicate it. Just think about what are the basics here that I'm absolutely going to need to fly this plane. And the basics, thinking about not only gauges that are going to tell you what you're doing in terms of how fast you're going or what altitude you're at or etc., but also telling you what the engine's doing. That's kind of a nice way to visualize that. You want to know all these kinds of things as pilot in command. Next on the list, the oil temperature gauge. Again, getting to the engine. You don't just want to know what you're doing, how high you are, how fast you're going. You want to know how the engine's humming along, humming and humming and humming and humming and humming. So you're going to need that oil temperature gauge. So that's the O in A, tomato, flames. Then the M, the manifold pressure gauge. Some of these may or may not apply to the aircraft that you're currently flying. It may or may not, but if it does, you're going to need that manifold pressure gauge on the aircraft. Next is the airspeed indicator. Again, just simplistic form. You think you would need that? Yes, absolutely, you're going to need the airspeed indicator. How you going? Hey, that airspeed, that thing is thinging. Rotate, A, one time. They in the green, baby. So you see, if you think about it logically like that, what are some pieces of equipment that I'm absolutely going to need? It's kind of easy to fill in that A, tomato, flames. So you can fill in that A, tomato, flames going down and just think about those pieces of equipment. After the airspeed indicator, the temp gauge. Again, back to that engine, understanding what's happening, what's going on there. Then the oil pressure gauge. You want the oil temperature, you want the oil pressure, always monitoring that engine. Boom, A. Next, if you know what the oil is doing, wouldn't you also need to know what the fuel is doing? So of course you're going to need fuel gauges, baby. That's of course one of the F's on A, tomato, flames. Get ready to start that flames with fuel gauges. Then after that, the landing gear position indicator. Again, if you have that retractable kind of gear, if some of this may apply or may not apply, but if you do, obviously that would be very necessary for you to at least know what position the landing gear is in. So that's going to be part of A, tomato, flames. Then anti-collision lights. Gonna need them things, baby. Hey, you're gonna need the anti-collision lights for all aircraft manufactured after 1996. And you're gonna see anti-collision lights show up twice. It's gonna show up on a daytime section and it's gonna show up on the nighttime section as well. So that's kind of give you a clue. If it's showing up twice like that, the significance and the importance of having those anti-collision lights. The next, of course, the magnetic compass. Again, the basics. You want to know where you're going, right? You want to know which direction you're flying in. The basis of what you think you're going to possibly need. And then, of course, your emergency locator transmitter. Again, safety. So if you think about the basis of flying and safety, you can kind of fill in this atornado flames pretty extraordinary and pretty good just based off your memory and what you know about visualizing in the cockpit and outside the aircraft and control services and looking around. Then, of course, lastly, seat belts. Again, the last two, think about safety. ELT, emergency locator transmitter, your seat belts. Need that. Hey, boom! And then for a night flight, not only are you going to need everything in atornado flames in that acronym, you're going to have to add the word flaps to it. And that's going to give you indicators of additional equipment that's going to be required for you to fly at night. So again, start to just sit back and think logically here. If I'm flying at night, what kind of equipment would be listed that hasn't already been said that I'm possibly going to need? More than likely, it's going to be everything pertaining to lights, right? Because you're flying at night. So if you think about it in that regard, like it'll be easy for you to fill it in. So of course you start to think about, okay, flaps, something associated with light and light sources. What fuses? Boom, at the top there. Then the next, of course, your landing light. Gonna need that. Hey, you only need that landing light if the aircraft is for hire. But have that on your list for flaps, fuses, landing light, and then there it is again, anti-collision lights. Boom! And the difference here for the anti-collision lights at night that's needed is for aircraft manufactured after 1971 in that thing. Then of course position lights, that's that red and green on the two wings, and then of course that white on the tail, let you know what time it is. And then lastly, you need some source of power. That means that your generator or your alternator has to be working. Let go! Hey, as you can see, this is a lot to remember. It's not like many other acronyms in aviation that are a little bit shorter, a little bit more easy to remember, and you can put together all kind of rhyme schemes. There are literally 18 different things when you go across atornado flames flaps for you to remember. That can be very difficult to do. So here's a little bit of a trick, a couple tricks that can help you out along the way. Number one of a trick that you can do is all about repetition. Every time that you go fly, think about atornado flames and quickly write it down, jot it down on your notepad, the acronym atornado flames, and just randomly do like a sequence and play a little game. How many can you remember and write down and fill in that atornado flames real quickly? That's one way to kind of get it to your memory. But you know what the ultimate way is? You don't necessarily have to know all of this verbatim. The one thing that's great for you to memorize, instead of trying to memorize 18 different things, is to memorize where the information is located in your foreign. If you know that all of this information is documented in the foreign in 91.205, that can be a great head start for you. Because remember, your check ride, your oral, a lot of those things are going to be open book. Just think back when you were in school, or if you're currently in school right now, open book tests. You're going to be able to reference a lot of your materials, but you need to know where to find it. A book doesn't do you any good if you don't really know where to find it. So what is easier to memorize? Is it easier to memorize 18 different things? Or is it easier to memorize one good thing and like knowing where it is in the foreign and knowing how to quickly find it? If you memorize, required equipment, you're talking about 91.205, boom, pop up in the foreign, there it is right there, tell you all of these items that you need. So try to memorize where it's located versus memorizing the 18 different things. But for the 18 different things, always familiarize yourself with that by playing that little game in the beginning, jotting down atornado flames and just writing down how many can you remember real quickly. That way you're playing both sides and you can know the equipment and you're memorizing it before every flight, and you can understand these items and where they're located, but you also know where to find them. And that's the most important thing. Let go! Don't forget to like this video, comment on this video, share this video, and subscribe to this channel. I am Donovan Batiste. This is Leadership Mindset, a place where you can come for free and fun videos about everything that you need to know for you to become a pilot or stay proficient. Because I want you to feel what pilots all over the world feel when we're swinging and banging that thing. Hey! Love you one time. Subscribe to this channel.